So this is one of the best phones from last year. But a year later, how is this phone holding up? The only way I know how to find out is to give up my iPhone 14 Pro and switch to this budget/mid-range phone for a few weeks. So here is what you need to know about me first. I haven't used an Android phone as my main phone for a very long time. And it's been even longer since the last time I used a mid-range or a budget Android phone. Okay, I'm trying to set up this phone right. And wow, this phone is a lag fest. Even like the basic animations to slide from one page to another are just so laggy. I'm just gonna check if there's a software update or something. Something has to be the case. There is a software update. It is a big one. It does bring Android 13 and One UI 5.1, so hopefully that fixes the issues and it was just something that needs to be fixed via software update. The update definitely helped, but this phone cannot be described as fast. It takes a few seconds to catch up when you want to quickly switch from one activity to another. For instance, every time I use Bitwarden to autofill my passwords, it just takes a few seconds before I get to the authentication screen and use my fingerprint. But despite the limited performance, this phone still supports split-screen multitasking and floating windows. It is not a bad experience, but everything is a little less responsive when you have more than one app on the screen. The octa-core Exynos 1280 with 6 gigs of RAM on paper sounds like a great combo, but only 2 out of the 8 cores are performance cores and the rest of the 6 are efficiency cores. And because of that, even when you disable almost everything you could, put a bunch of applications in deep sleep, the bloatware still holds this phone back. You know what? We might be able to fix that actually. With a combination of universal debootloader and signing out of Samsung apps, I think I've come to a point where this phone is probably as responsive as some of the flagship devices I've used previously. Even with the software holding this phone back, you can do so much with this phone. You can even connect a variety of USB devices, including a USB audio interface with an XLR microphone, and record a voiceover for a review video if you feel inclined to do so. It is a fairly capable pocket computer. You can create and edit documents, edit photos and videos, and even run graphic-intensive games without any issues. In the right environment, this phone looks and performs like a flagship. Speaking of looking like a flagship, the design language is definitely the same as Galaxy S21 series. With the plastic bezels and the soft touch plastic back, it is a plastic phone through and through. Which I don't mean as an insult, but more like a matter of fact. Going around the phone, you have the volume buttons and power buttons on the right side. The SIM tray lives on the bottom, which can either accommodate 2 SIM cards or 1 SIM card and a microSD card. There's also a USB-C port right next to the SIM tray. I'm thinking that the USB-C interface is actually USB 3.0 because I tried to compare it to my LG V60 for a 2.3 something gigabit file, and the transfer speeds between the two devices was pretty much identical. If anything, I would say the LG V60 was a little bit slower, which basically means if you record videos on this phone, like I've been doing for this review video, you can transfer those files to a PC without too much of a hassle, which is more than what I can say about this $1,000 iPhone 14 Pro. It can record videos in ProRes, but the problem is that those videos will be shot on this phone, it will live on this phone and die on this phone because there's no reliable way to send it from this phone to a storage, to a computer. I think you can send it to a Mac using AirDrop, but even that fails sometimes. It is probably the fact that I live in the Apple ecosystem now that being able to transfer files from one computer to another computer in the year 2023 impresses me as much as it does. But yeah, this budget phone can transfer giant video files if you're recording them on this phone and editing them on a computer. Officially, you can charge the A53 at 25 watts, but with the 65 watt charger that I have, it hovers around 20 watts mostly, which can take you from 20% to 100% in just a little bit over an hour. That's not really impressive in today's market, but I can't complain because you don't really need to charge it very often. I had some issues with the battery life early on. The Google app, for whatever reason, was the biggest battery drain, but after a couple of weeks of use, multiple restarts, and I guess a bunch of optimization, the phone has come to a point where I can easily squeeze out 4 to 5 hours of screen on time, which is good enough for my day-to-day use. One of the best features of this phone is the 1080p 120Hz AMOLED display in the true Samsung fashion. It is a beautiful panel for any form of content. Text, games, videos, everything just looks amazing on this display. I've been using this phone to watch Fire Force for the last few days, and the scenes with the dark background and bright fire in the foreground, it just looks so good. I have no complaints with what this display has to offer at this price point, and right under this amazing display is an optical fingerprint scanner. Am I the only one who did not know about this? When did the fingerprint scanners under the display get this good? On budget phones, I mean. So this works 90% of the time. It's not as fast as the Touch ID 2.0 or whatever like outside your phone fingerprint scanners are, but it works almost every single time if I just rest my finger long enough, and it is working reliably. I've never had any issues with it. So no matter what orientation I put my thumb in, it works. It's not like an iPhone that if it is in landscape mode, it cannot unlock your phone unless you bought the most recent, most expensive phone that's out there. But yeah, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. Touch ID is superior to Face ID. I will fight you in the comments. For now though, let's talk about cameras. This is the front-facing camera. This video is being recorded. I think it is 1080p, but I am not 100% sure. Other than the front-facing camera, there are 3 cameras and a depth sensor on the back. Here are the specs for anybody who cares, but photos are what really matters. The main sensor takes decent photos in most scenarios. The colors are bright and punchy, maybe a little too saturated sometimes. The dynamic range is decent. For low-light photos, this phone has a night mode. Given that you can hold your phone still for a few seconds, you can get some really nice looking shots from this phone. And if the night mode is not sufficient, you can switch to Pro mode and capture an image with a maximum shutter lag of 10 seconds. Let's talk about the ultra-wide sensor. It is only good in very specific scenarios, primarily outdoors and brightly lit days. Even on an overcast day outside, you end up with some fuzzy photos. And finally, you get a macro sensor here that I personally really enjoy. I know some people don't care about this, but I love having a macro sensor. I enjoy the textures that I'm able to capture with this camera. The macro sensor can also serve as a tool, primarily as a substitute for a microscope in a pinch, because I've actually used it to inspect sample parts. I have used it to take pictures of samples to review manufacturing defects on some small plastic parts I've bought. Having said all of that, I don't think anybody should buy this phone in 2023 unless you get a really good deal at it. You have to be getting it for almost free for me to justify buying this phone in 2023. If you are looking to buy this phone brand new, maybe you should look at the A54. It is a better looking, more powerful device and just has a more modern look. If you're looking at the used market, the A53 goes about $200. And at that point, you're in the market where you can get something significantly better than this phone just from a few years ago. I'll be honest with you all, the switch to Android was so much more enjoyable than I thought it would be. Even the always-on display is so much better on this phone. On the flip side, Android still kind of sucks with automation because it can do really good device automation, but it is pretty bad at doing automation of tasks. And that is because of the lack of synergy between third-party applications and first-party applications. That has been a problem on Android in general.